Hi, folks. Welcome to season 4, episode 10 of the Lemons and Pineapples podcast with me, Emma O'Brien. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking to you about how intergenerational trauma shapes your core beliefs and how you can start to rewrite those. If you didn't listen to last week's episode, I talked a lot about limiting beliefs, how you can identify them, and how you can start to shift them. And what I'm going to share today really builds on what I talked about last week. One of the ways that we form limiting core beliefs that keep us stuck in patterns, sometimes for decades or for our whole life if we don't shift them, is the stuff we inherit from our family lineage. Now, intergenerational trauma can refer to specific trauma. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I think another way to look at it as well is intergenerational, like inherited patterning that shows up. And these are patterns and behaviors and things that shape who we are that perhaps aren't particularly helpful anymore, but we can't always just kind of figure out why do we do this? It doesn't help me, but yet I keep finding myself in a pattern that keeps repeating. I keep finding myself in a relationship pattern that keeps repeating. And perhaps my mum and my grandma found themselves in a similar relationship pattern. This is intergenerational stuff, is when we find events that show up throughout generations that are the same, things that happen to women of 3 or 4 generations, but it's an event that happens when they're all the same age. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason to that. I can't explain that. I don't think anybody can explain that, but maybe you can relate to things like that happening in your own families. I reread Peter Levine's book, Waking the Tiger, which talks about trauma, and it talks about intergenerational trauma. And one of the examples he cites in this book is that there was a woman who was in a plane crash, and her father had been in a plane crash, and somebody else before had been in a plane crash. They obviously all survived. They were small plane crashes, but they'd all been at a similar point in life. They'd found themselves in plane crashes, which is crazy because the probability of any of us being in a plane crash is teeny, teeny, tiny, let alone 3 generations of people having plane crashes all in similar places and similar circumstances. It beggars belief, really. And Peter Levine was like, we can't explain this. I can't explain it to you. But this is an example of intergenerational patterning and intergenerational traumatic things showing up. So maybe you can already think of an example whilst I'm talking here. I know I can think of multiple things that I won't share publicly, but there are various things that have shown up in my family lineage that you go, there is way more to this than just sheer coincidence. So, how does our intergenerational patterning shape us? So, as well as things that are inherited, and I'm going to share an example with you now of inherited trauma and how it literally passes through your genetic lineage, we can have that form of intergenerational stuff, and we can also have the intergenerational things where we have had behaviors and stereotypical things, gender roles modeled to us. Grandma did it this is how grandma's life was. So mum grew up watching how grandma was treated by men. For instance, mum goes, this is how women are treated by men. I'm going to embody that and model it. And then daughter then looks at it and goes, well, this is how mum was treated by men. The modeling has shown me that women are not very valuable, and if you're not attractive enough, you're not appealing to men, and men don't find women like us attractive. And that modeling plays down through the whole kind of generations, and until you as a person who finds yourself in that change it doesn't change. It just continues down the patterning. When you have children, children have children. So we all, as we are listening, as we are now, are able to start making changes to the modeling we have had so we can model differently for our children. But we have to bring it into conscious awareness first. So the way to kind of identify whether you think you've got some intergenerational stuff running is What patterns do I run that my parents ran? And perhaps if you know about grandparents, or you can ask your parents, did they also have the same thing happening? Then we can know we've got some familial patterning happening here, and there's some work to be done to change that. So, in case you're listening and thinking, well, this sounds a little bit far-fetched, Emma, let me tell you about one of the most well-researched examples of intergenerational trauma. So, there was a study done of Holocaust survivors and their children. And psychologists noticed that even though the second generation hadn't directly experienced the atrocities of the Holocaust, they showed symptoms of anxiety, hypervigilance, and survivor's guilt. And there was a neuroscientist called Rachel Yehuda, and her team at Mount Sinai discovered that both survivors and their adult children had changes in their FKBP5 gene, which is the gene that helps regulate your body's stress response. So their parents' experience of being in the Holocaust had changed their genetic structure, and that had been passed down to their children. So the findings from this suggest that trauma can cause epigenetic changes. So biological changes that shape how future generations respond to stress. If you listen to next week's episode, I've got a wonderful guest on called Karen Bazansky, and we actually talk. Going to be talking more about this in next week's episode. So she cites a couple of other animal studies that have been done that have found this to happen. The transmission isn't just biological, so we learn emotional patterns from our parents. So if we've got parents that are living in survival mode and they are exhibiting behaviors like overprotection, emotional shutdown, or a deep fear that the world isn't a safe place, those behaviors become our blueprints for how love, safety, and worth are experienced. So one of the things I help women with is self-worth and self-doubt and people-pleasing and overthinking, and being able to actually step up into leading their own lives rather than leading lives for everybody else, which is something that women often do. But if that has been what has been modeled to you by your mother and her mother, and maybe, on both sides, it's probably quite likely going back, just two generations of, post-war generations, that'll be what you believe is normal and how you believe the way to move through the world is this particular set of behaviors, until you find they don't help you, until you find that the behaviors you're running keep putting you into relationships with narcissists, relationships where you're emotionally neglected, because essentially what we end up doing is recreating what was normal for us in childhood, even if that normal isn't particularly good. What's normal for our nervous system, what's safe for our nervous system, is familiar. And if the familiar is dysfunctional, we will go out and recreate dysfunctional situations to put ourselves back into familiarity, until you wake up and go, oh my God, what am I doing? Why am I experiencing the same relationship pattern, even though I've been in 4 different relationships and the same things played out? There's work to be done there to shift your underlying beliefs. So how do we go about shifting our intergenerational patterning? Obviously, super traumatic stuff like the example with the Holocaust survivors needs to be worked through with, if you're having effects of that, worked through with a trauma-informed person. If you are noticing patterning showing up that is unhelpful, that's something that coaching and also shamanic energy work can start to help you with. So I'll give you an example of how I've used shamanic work to really help me. So shamanic work is energy work. We're working in a different realm of consciousness, if you like. I could get super woo-woo with it, or I can try and keep it practical, because I like to use it as a practical tool, in that you're working in an imaginal realm. You're working in the subconscious realm, and you're bypassing your logical mind, which allows you to start to figure out the kind of deeper stuff that's going on under the surface, if you like. So for me, if I do a shamanic journey, I everything that comes up is metaphor. I might be journeying back to a past life, or I might just be journeying to receive a metaphor of something that when I can work with the metaphor and what it represents, I can start to go, oh, okay, I understand how this plays out for me. So about 2 months ago, I got to the point where I was feeling really, really, really stuck in both my businesses. I was doing a lot of marketing. I had a lot of things I wanted to do. I was writing out to-do lists. I was doing a lot of busy work, but I wasn't really getting anywhere. And I was also struggling massively with procrastinating. So I'd get to my desk and be like, okay, I'm ready to work. Oh, wait, no, I'm not. And I sat with this and just thought, actually, I don't understand this. I am so stuck and I don't really know how to move myself out of it. Because I have my shamanic practice, I was like, let me just see if I can figure out in the energetic realm, I can do a bit of subconscious work and see if I can actually dig a bit deeper if there's something under the surface going on here. And there's some beliefs I'm running that are perhaps driving the show here, but I can't think what they would be. So my Grandma L, appears quite often when I'm doing shamanic work. So I ended up doing a journey and digging back into kind of her past, if you like. And what I got from the journey I did was she lived with the belief that women are worthless. Now, that was like a light bulb moment for me because I thought, oh, okay, I can see how that's showing up for me. I can see how that's showing up for my mum. I can see how the modeling I had with women who were always quite subservient, women who didn't have their own careers, all of these things have kind of played out to demonstrate that. Not my belief, Grandma L's belief that's been filtered down. So I looked at it and I did a bit of healing, a bit of ancestral healing work with that. And just by kind of realizing that was a big light bulb moment for me, and being able to work energetically with it and to actually do a bit of healing for Grandma L, who's carrying that around, helped me enormously. I cannot tell you, after doing a half-hour shamanic journey to just go and figure that out and do a bit of energy healing on it, I have been so productive ever since because it shifted something in me. So whether it's real, whether I'm actually connecting up with Grandma Al, or whether in some part of my mind I am, it is totally irrelevant. What is relevant is that it helped me. It has helped me shift myself, and it's helped me get back into a way better state of mind and to start seeing some results because I'm actually doing needle moving work, not busy work. Because I've shared last week's episode talking about limiting beliefs. Our beliefs that we have keep us stuck running the same looping patterns. And we will sabotage ourselves if we try and move out of them without doing the work underneath to get those beliefs to move and shift. So my invitation to you, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh God, there's a pattern that keeps showing up for me. It's keeping me completely stuck. I don't know how to fix it. Maybe you've sat in therapy for a long time talking about it and still nothing has moved or worked. I will invite you to book a breakthrough session with me. This is a 75-minute coaching session, but I will help you identify and clear one of your core limiting beliefs. So we can be super practical with this and we can do some thought work around it. We can be super into the imaginal realms with it, and we can do some shamanic energy work with it if that's also something you're open to get these beliefs to shift and move so you can see some positive change in your life. It doesn't have to take years to create positive change. It doesn't have to be a big fight. You don't have to sit and dredge up all of your old stuff and keep talking about things that happened when you were a child. I think this is one thing I have recorded an episode about why therapy is keeping you stuck, because sometimes talk therapy, if it doesn't have a clear goal and direction, which from my experience it often doesn't, just keeps the experience of what you don't want very much alive for you. If you want to change the pattern, you have to change the narrative and change your behavior. When you do that, things will move in the direction that you want them to, but you have to do a little bit of inner work to get yourself there. And I am here for that. So you can book a breakthrough session directly in the show notes. If you want to talk to me first, you can send me a DM on Instagram. It's at Emma O'Brien Coach. You can also just book a free connection call with me online and we can chat about what's happening for you. The link to do that is also in the show notes. Thank you for joining me today, folks. I've loved sharing this with you. As always, if you've got something to say, you've had an aha moment, you can pop me a message and let me know. I love to hear from folks who listen to the podcast. So thank you again for joining me, and I will see you next week. Bye for now.